Hi, and welcome to this textbook affordability mini workshop. My name is Eric Frank. I'm the president and co-founder of Flat World Knowledge, the world's largest commercial publisher of free and open college textbooks. Just by means of background, I come with about 14 years of higher education publishing experience in sales, marketing, and senior management with both Cengage, formerly Thomson, and with Pearson Education. I want to begin by talking about the problem and how we arrived at the $200 textbook. I think that there's a profound value gap in the marketplace. On the one side of that value gap are students. They're increasingly wired and increasingly connected, but importantly, demographically bring less family income into the university or college than any generation prior and work more hours while they're in college than any generation prior. And so they stand on one side of the value gap. And on the other side is a product that hasn't fundamentally changed much, other than that it's become increasingly unaffordable to increasing numbers of students. I've listed some publisher prices of some common introductory textbooks, and you can see that we have indeed reached the era of the $200 textbook being the norm. The pain of the $200 textbook is not evenly distributed. As you can see here by this Department of Education statistic, if you're spending X on tuition and fees and you're at a 2-year community college, you're now spending 72% of X, or almost as much for textbooks as you're spending for the rest of your education. If you're at a 4-year public institution, you're spending 26% of X for textbooks. And I think both of those numbers strike most people as disproportionately high. And the effect of this is certainly real and significant. What we're looking at here is a statistic from a study funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation intended to identify why students who were dropping out of college were dropping out. And so they interviewed 600 students, and the two most statistically important reasons cited for dropping out, and they scored significantly higher than any other factors, were these two. The cost of textbooks and other fees besides tuition affected me financially, and I had to work as well, and it was too stressful trying to do both. And so, as we hit the early 2000s, students are feeling frustrated and angry. And what do? Well, they respond. And this is where the internet has really fundamentally disrupted the textbook publishing company and created a negative feedback loop. So students respond by going to the internet and increasingly finding an alternative to purchasing that expensive new textbook. They buy more used books as the used book market became more rational, national, and efficient. They find more global gray market textbooks as books that get sold by publishers overseas at lower prices make their way back for sale into the United States. They find more options online, like rental and getting money back at the end of the semester. And they find more illegal opportunities to access textbooks with the explosion of piracy and peer-to-peer trading of illegally scanned PDF files of textbooks. This means that publishers are selling less new units year on year and watching their sales erode. So what were we doing in the publishing industry to try and protect our revenue? Well, we were fundamentally acting defensively. The first thing we were doing was raising prices faster to make up for the declining unit sales. So when I started in the industry, price increases were on average 4 to 5% a year. They're now double digits each year running. We would try to confuse the marketplace by bundling an item with the textbook or customizing that textbook in some way in order to create a unique ISBN at each institution where that book was being used. This had the effect of, in essence, making it impossible for students or bookstores to locate some of these alternatives that we see over here because the ISBN is unique to their institution. And then, of course, everybody's favorite phenomenon, the new edition. What we've seen is new editions increase in pace from what was on average about 4 to 4.5 years between new editions to what is now on average 18 to 24 months between new editions. The reason is, of course, the need to flush the market of all these alternatives to force the purchase from the publisher. And while all this is having the short-term effect of preserving revenue for the industry, it's having the longer-term effect of further alienating students and forcing them to look even harder for alternatives and thus creating a negative feedback loop. In the end, the result is nobody in this market is happy. Students are feeling frustrated and angry about the price of textbooks. Faculty, I think, feel increasingly like unwilling participants in a marketplace that doesn't work, and they don't know what to do about it. And authors who are writing more frequently to keep up with the pace of new revisions and are earning less income because they're watching their sales being eroded by used books, pirated books, and all the other alternatives that I mentioned. And so when you have a value gap that profound, solutions begin to emerge in the marketplace, and that is indeed the case in the textbook market. One form of solution is, of course, legislation. We have the Higher Education Opportunity Act, which in essence mandates earlier disclosure of ISBNs being used in courses tied to public releases of course schedules, and mandates that publishers are more transparent about pricing and that they offer items both bundled and unbundled. And we also see lots of states enacting state-level legislation. We see the rise of ebook models represented primarily by the two leaders in the space, CourseSmart, which is a consortium of all the big publishers creating a new company to act as an outlet for their ebooks, and Cafe Scribe, powered by Follett, the book distribution company. The fundamental model here is to take the same book, make it available digitally as an ebook, have it expire after a 6-month subscription, and in essence charge about 50% of the cost of a print book in the bookstore for access to the digital format for a 6-month period. We also see the entry of e-readers tied to e-bookstores into the marketplace, whether that's existing bookstores like Barnes & Noble, Amazon through their Kindle, Apple with the iPad, but clearly these are going to be increasingly in the hands of students over time, and students will, I think, be purchasing more of their textbooks onto the device, which will generally have the effect of lowering cost and potentially adding some functionality, although today those books are priced similarly to ebooks and are still generally feeling too expensive for the average student to purchase for digital access. We also see the rise of rental models, whether it's run through independent bookstores or through any of the bookstore chains, or through new venture capital funded national companies like Chegg or BookRenter.com. Students generally are able to rent a book for about 40% of the price of a brand new book, and then of course return it at the end of the semester. And then we see the rise of what I think is the most profound and important long-term trend, because it truly represents a paradigm shift in publishing, and that's the rise of open or open source textbooks. And you see there players like Connections at Rice University, the Florida Citrus Grove Project, or commercial entrants like the company that I co-founded, Flat World Knowledge. So we're going to spend some time talking about free and open textbooks, again, because I think that it adds the most value in terms of cost savings for students, improvements potentially to learning outcomes, and value across the value chain from students to faculty to authors. So we're going to begin by defining what open is, because I think it's commonly misunderstood when it's applied to textbooks. We live in a world of materials that are published and then copyrighted. Textbooks are no exception. And when those copyrighted works are made available to the public, they're made available under an all rights reserved license, meaning the copyright holder reserves all of the rights. If a copyright holder, a creator, an author, a publisher, wanted to give more rights to the user, historically they only had one choice, which was at the other end of the spectrum, which was to put it in the public domain or reserve no rights, which was generally an unacceptable solution for most. So as the internet has become an increasingly important medium for creating, interacting with, distributing content, legal scholars came up with a very reasonable solution in the middle, the concept of publishing copyrighted works under an open license where some rights are reserved to the copyright holder and some rights are given to the consumer. So what are the rights that a consumer gets that they might want to have in connection with an open textbook? You could think of these as the 4 R's of open. They have the legal right to make verbatim copies of something and reuse those copies legally. They have the right to revise something and improve it for a course or their local curriculum. The right to remix something with something else. For example, an open textbook with an open simulation and an open case study to create a new learning resource for the course, and the right to redistribute textbooks legally for free, as we'll talk about momentarily. That's fundamentally the legal definition of open. So where do free and open textbooks come from? Well, they began with the individual. So individual authors out there just said, I would like to release my book under a different set of terms and allow people more flexibility in how they use it. And so you began to see individuals publishing their books generally online and making them available under open licenses, like this particular linear algebra book by Professor Rob Beezer at the University of Puget Sound. As that became an increasingly common phenomenon, it gave rise to aggregators or platforms. The two you see here are probably the leading platforms out there: Connections, housed out of Rice University, and Merlot, based in the Cal State University system. Both basically serve as repositories for individuals to be able to upload their openly licensed materials and make them available for the general public to search, find, and potentially put things together and deliver them into their classrooms. And now I think we see the maturing of this open movement with the entry of commercial and sustainable models with professional publishers like Flat World Knowledge building new models around free and open textbooks. So what I'm going to do to make all of this much more concrete and real is walk through a case study of what Flat World Knowledge does, our business model, and how one can produce high-quality, sustainable textbooks that benefit everybody in the marketplace. So the model that we've brought to the table has three core components: publish great textbooks, make them available under open licenses, and provide students with lots of choices about how they consume that textbook. By great textbooks, I mean we basically do what the traditional publishing industry does. We seek out the leading scholars or authors in their field and commission them to write an exclusive textbook. We professionally develop it, meaning we do extensive peer review, professional art, professional design, accuracy checking, etc. And we fully support textbooks through the provision of things like test banks, instructors' manuals, print desk copies, learning management system compatible test item files, etc. All of that, I think, is just about getting on the playing field with a comparable quality product that the industry provides today. And I think you can see from some of the early adopters of Flat World Knowledge's textbooks like Princeton, Carnegie Mellon, Penn State, Cornell, that it is indeed possible to produce textbooks of the highest quality under a new open model. So if that's how we're the same, how are we different? Well, this is where it's all about open licensing. So we publish our textbooks under a Creative Commons open license, conveying those 4 R's to the end user, the faculty member, to be able to make them better for their class if they so choose. One doesn't need to do anything. You can just use the textbook off the shelf. And we provide a technology platform to actually allow the faculty member to take advantage of the open license. So an example. I'm using an Introduction to Psychology book by Charles Stangor, an author at University of Maryland, and I want to make some changes. I click Customize this book, and I enter the book editor, where I can rearrange chapters and sections, edit the existing text, insert my own content, and more. So let's say that I wanted to make some changes in and around Chapter 10. Well, I could click and hold any section or chapter of the book and simply drag and drop it to a new location in the table of contents. If I wanted to delete something, it's as simple as going to the section or chapter I wish to delete and clicking the trash can. And if I wanted to edit the existing content in a section by inserting links, adding a paragraph, etc., I just go to that section and click, and I open up an editor in which I can make those changes, which I'll show you in a moment in a slightly different context. What I'm going to show you is also how I would actually add my own original content and by creating a new section of content. So let's say I wanted to talk about the events in the Middle East and the psychology of those events. Well, I could click on Make a New Section, and I'm going to call my section The Psychology of Protest, which I type in there and save. And you can now see that we've created a new unnumbered section, The Psychology of Protest. And let's say I wanted to create it in the book between sections 10.3 and what's currently 10.4. I could just drag it and drop it, and now it's in place as section 10.4, The Psychology of Protest. Now let's begin to build our sections to see how easy it is to improve a textbook for a course. I'm going to begin by inserting some learning objectives. So by clicking that, I open up an editor, type in some learning objectives, and save them. I can now go and say I want to insert a paragraph. So I will type a paragraph of content about some research looking at the psychology of protest and go ahead and save it. And you'll notice that I referenced watching the video below of the Egyptian protests of 2011. Well, one of the great things is I can simply go to insert a video clip, type in a title, add a URL from Blip TV or YouTube, describe it, create the citation, and go ahead and click Save. And now I've integrated that video directly into my section. And then finally, let me conclude by adding some exercises around the video. So I'll call those video comprehension check, add some questions, and save them. And I've just created a brand new section of content in no time on the psychology of protest. I'm going to go ahead and save it, and you can see that our system automatically converts it to look exactly like our existing online textbook, and voila, it is available to students. I go ahead and I click Publish, and here's where some rebuilding happens. We rebuild the book, the table of contents, index, etc. rebuilds automatically. The system generates multiple learning formats of that book instantly, from web books to softcover books to PDF files for self-printing to mobile reader books for just about every mobile reader out there, to audio books, and even including accessible books for students with print disabilities in Daisy readable and digital braille formats. And the model is to let students choose the format that's going to work best for them. So what we've talked about so far is how open textbooks can really lead to taking a book that's already very good and making it the perfect book for one's course. But now let's shift to talk about how that perfect book, whether you've changed it or whether you've taken the off-the-shelf book, is much more affordable to the students than the current offerings by the current industry. And so here's where we move to the third part of the model, student choices. The first radically different choice is that students can literally read the entire textbook, whether it's been modified or not, for free online. It's a web-hosted textbook where they can access it. It has full search, note-taking, and it is literally available for free to every student in that class. And the accessible versions in digital braille and Daisy readable formats are also available for free so that every student has equal access to the textbook material. So you ask, how on earth do you make money? How do you build a sustainable model where you pay authors, you pay for high quality textbook development, and that's by offering students lots of choices. So many students prefer to read free online and many prefer not to. They would appreciate the convenience of some alternative format. And so we sell them at affordable prices alternative formats. They can buy softcover books in black and white or color in their college bookstore or direct off the website. They can buy audiobooks by the book or chapter. They can buy and download PDF books for printing by the book or by the chapter. They can buy versions for their handheld readers, for their iPhones, and again, they always have access to the free webbook. And you can see that prices are generally $35 and below for just about everything, the exception being the color softcover book, which only a small percentage of students actually opt to purchase. They also have the option to purchase from various study aids that we produce for $15 for the course or $2.50 per chapter. But I think the key message here is that professors get to choose the book and students get to choose the format and price that works best for them. As a point of data, 44% of the students, the 115,000 students that have used Flat World Books in the past year and a half, 44% of them choose to read the free book only. They read online for free. 33% choose to purchase the black and white or color book, and most of them purchase that black and white book for somewhere between $30 and $35. 3% choose audiobooks, 17% choose the print it yourself PDF files, and 3% choose the ebook files, although we expect that can continue to grow as the base of e-readers continues to grow. And we calculate that through use of an open textbook in a classroom, the average student savings per student per course is $80. They're spending on average, when you blend free and paid users, about $20 with Flat World Knowledge, and they're assuming new and used blend in a traditional class, about $100 for a traditional textbook per class. Can open textbooks lead to better outcomes? Well, I think the answer is yes. Students clearly get free access, they get affordable choices, and they get to choose things that fit their learning style. Faculty get to start with quality and actually increase and improve the book for their particular course. Authors actually have an opportunity to earn more income through higher royalty rates on more consistent sales, gain market share faster by adding real value to customers, and keep customers longer because people who make modifications to improve a book use it for longer. But one of the most interesting and I think promising outcomes to date is the possibility that students will actually learn more through the use of open textbooks. This was an article in Community College Weekly by President Linda Lacey of Cerritos College. At Cerritos, they had a hypothesis that students were not purchasing textbooks because of cost and were therefore failing out of courses at a higher rate than they should have. And so they said if we remove the barrier to accessing the textbook, we should see improvements in course completion rates. So they piloted 3 open textbooks in 3 introductory business courses, and as Dr. Lacey points out, across those 3 courses, they saw a course completion rate increases of between 10 and 15%, an extraordinary result for doing nothing but changing a textbook. And finally, are there any benefits to and value to bookstores? And I think the answer there is also yes. This is a quote from Jade Roth, Vice President of Barnes & Noble College Booksellers, but we also have relationships with Follett, with the Independent College Store Association. But basically, I think the quote that you're looking at indicates bookstores are looking to partner with innovation like open textbooks to move their business model forward and continue to provide low-cost options while still being able to generate income in the bookstore and for the university. And it's possible for them to do so in the open textbook model. Briefly, I'll mention a second model that offers some real opportunity and promise, which is an institutional seat license model. So in this model, rather than each individual student choosing to use either the free book or purchase a single format, what happens here is that the institution purchases that format on behalf of 100% of the students enrolled in a class. And so this is an example from Virginia State where they use 8 introductory business books from Flat World and license them. And so they pay Flat World Knowledge $20 per student per course, and they can use more than 1 book if they want per course. It doesn't matter. They pay $20. And when a student accesses their course, they have complete access to every version of the book that Flat World produces, from the web book to the PDFs to the ebooks to the audiobooks, and all of the digital study aids that we produce for that $20. And so the student makes out by having access affordably to a wide range of formats. They get discounted access to print books should they choose to purchase a print book, discounted from the standard rate, and the university wins because they're making content available to 100% of the students, and there's an income model in this for institutions that can preserve income streams for the college. In conclusion, I think we are at this incredibly important crossroads. Technology and new business models enable, I think, the free flow of knowledge to those who want and need it for improvement of their standard of living and human development. And I think old business models are standing in the way. And it reminds me of when this technology, the Gutenberg printing press, came out in 1508. And though the authorities at that time, the European Catholic Church, said, this is going to be a disaster. We can't just let anybody make a book. We can't just let anybody read a book. This is going to undermine the authority of our institutions. It's going to threaten the morality of society. The scribes are going to lose this rich scribal tradition. They're going to lose their jobs, and so forth and so on, with a litany of concerns. And every single one of those concerns turned out to be true. The scribes did lose their jobs. Morality was threatened as pornography quickly became the bestseller and remains the bestseller of anything ever produced on a printing press. The church's authority was immediately threatened as the first mass media event on the printing press was Martin Luther, publishing his 95 treatises. But somehow we don't look back at 1508 and say, what a disaster. We say this was the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment, when science and progress and knowledge was spread throughout the globe and unprecedented advancements in human development occurred as a result. That same opportunity stands before us now through the internet, and I think stands before us in a way that will ultimately make the impact of the Gutenberg printing press seem relatively small in comparison. And the question is, are we going to experiment wildly and move forward with new models, or are we going to dig on our heels and look for reasons to stick with the old models, which we know are no longer sustainable and no longer optimized? And so with that, I thank you very much for your time. I hope that you found something valuable in all this, and wish that if there's anything that we at Flat World Knowledge can do to provide further information on this issue, please don't hesitate to look us up on the web and give us a holler. Thank you very much.